out of complete nowhere, Eminem decides to drop his 11th album called Music to be Murdered By. Going to this, I think it's natural to be extremely apprehensive considering the quality of, I think, all bar one of his albums in the past decade. I think the Marshall Mathers LP2 was kind of a relative return to form for Eminem, but that may be just because the couple of preceding albums and the couple of albums that came after that were so lackluster for someone of Eminem's stature. He's undoubtedly one of the best rappers to ever do it, but his output for the last over a decade now has been woefully inconsistent. He's been batting way below this average, and it's kind of sad to say, but it's not a surprise that Music to be Murdered By continues that trend. Now, the subject matter that he chooses to discuss on this album isn't anything new for Eminem. He's talking about his haters, his own rapping ability, his past life, his kind of waning relevance in the rap game, his frustration with what's going on in the rap game, etc., etc., etc. But he does it all over the album in a way that's so bitter and immature that it kind of leaves a really rotten taste in your mouth by the time you get to its end. And that is extremely apparent on the intro song. On the intro song, first of all, there's a lot of corny ass bars all over the album. The first of which is "I'm still as fly as your zipper." Okay, but in this track, it's very apparent that what I like to think of Eminem as someone who does not give a fuck about what people say about him, and that's why I'm such a big fan of his earlier work. He's very unapologetic in the way he chooses to go about certain topics, but here, the way he goes about addressing his critics is that he seems extremely affected by it, or extremely annoyed by it, or it gets under his skin, but he plays it off as if he doesn't. And it's a very easy facade to look past. You can see that it does bother him, and it's fine if it does bother you, but he gives this particular subject so much attention and so much of his time, especially on the last couple of albums, that I just don't believe what he's saying anymore. And also on the intro track, he makes a very strange comparison between himself and Jay-Z and 2 Chainz, and I think the comparison is extremely inaccurate. Of course, the song Unaccommodating has been probably the one that's been making the most waves on the internet at the moment, mainly because of the reference to the Manchester bombings at the Ariana Grande concert a few years back. To be honest, I think there is a way to work in controversial subject matter and events into your writing. Eminem has done it before. He had the whole Columbine set of bars on the Marshall Mathers, on the first Marshall Mathers LP, and the way he worked that into the rhyme scheme and the narrative of the song was very witty and funny and clever, even though it was clearly very controversial at the time. But I think in this instance he doesn't do that, and it just comes off very insensitive and lazy. Again, I'm not surprised by this because Eminem, like I said, is very unapologetic. He has said things way worse than this. He's got songs about raping his mother, everything you can think of. I wouldn't want to be a hypocrite because there are artists that I love currently now that sometimes do say things similar to this. I remember Tyler Creator on Who That Boy said that cherry be the bomb like he ran in Boston, so I can't pretend to be not outraged at that but then turn my head and be outraged at this. I think it does come off a bit insensitive, and I can understand the outrage, but it's not surprising in the slightest. Of course, now for some reason Eminem's formed this relationship, this musical relationship with Ed Sheeran. When they get together, it's absolute dog shit in my opinion. And the song Those Kind of Nights, again, is one of those very mediocre, melodramatic rap pop ballad crossovers, and it's just, yeah. The song In Too Deep, the verses are okay, the hook is atrocious, not quite Venom levels of atrocious, but very, very jarring nonetheless. But the verses do have some clever storytelling and rhyme schemes in them that I do have to acknowledge. But then we get to the next song, which is Godzilla, which has some of the worst bars on the album, particularly the bar where he says, "I'm about to set trip, vacation plans. I got them passing out like what you do when you hand someone flyers." What? That is, it's just so lazy. Like, again, the technical ability with Eminem's music is never doubted. At the end of the song, he's got some interesting rhyme schemes and rhyme patterns, but it just doesn't make up for the complete lack of substance of most of these songs. The one exception to this, and I'd say the one song that is genuinely very good, is the song Darkness. It's the first time Eminem actually sounds sincere. You can tell that there's emotion in the songwriting. It's not melodramatic. It's actually kind of moving at times. Again, there are some questionable bars, especially the one where he says, "If I pop any caps, it better be off like vodka." It's kind of a stretch of a bar, but it's thematically and narratively relevant, so I can kind of look past that. He shows a lot of honesty and kind of insecurity as well, which we haven't heard for a long time with Eminem. The last few years it's been very, very angry and braggadocious from Eminem, and that's all we've gotten, but this is a different side to Eminem. Of course, there's the controversial subject matter about mass shootings. The latter half of the song is dedicated to all these cascading news reports of mass shootings going on in America. But it is, at the end of the day, a positive message, one that advocates for gun control. And I think this song is the one genuinely admirable artistic expression of Eminem's pure talent. I think the one thing that surprises me with this song as well is that it's handled with a surprising amount of sensitivity, and it doesn't dictate to the audience what specifically to think. Of course, it's pro gun control, but it doesn't explicitly tell you what to think and how to think and why to think. And I think that's something I have to acknowledge. Leaving Heaven, it's very, very average. It's very, very melodramatic. Skylar Grey's vocals are pretty good. But then we get to Yaya. Black Thought, easily and by far the best thing about this song. You can't really go wrong with a verse from Black Thought. Pardon me. The instrumental to me is a bit all over the place. Eminem has some playful and fun bars, and without the laziness and melodrama of preceding songs. Q-Tip's contribution. Q-Tip is a legend of the game, but I think this contribution from him was kind of phoned in. But I do think the worst thing about this specific song is definitely the instrumental. I think it's really, really, really sloppy. The song Stepdad just is a perfect example of why Eminem needs to stop singing and layering his vocals, because it sounds fucking awful. It sounds like a low humming chainsaw. Just you know the Eminem singing sound I'm talking about. I think it's just extremely, extremely jarring. He keeps doing it a lot, especially on recent albums. I think this Stepdad might have one of the worst bars on the album. I think it's so bad that it's hilarious. He says, "I'm talking euthanasia like kids in Taiwan." To give credit to Eminem, the bar where he says, "Ding dong, the pussy is dead," I kind of like that bar. Can't lie. The song Marsh is probably the most just dead, void, comatose song on the album. There's nothing interesting going on about this song. It's more like a black hole of an instrumental. There's barely an instrumental. Again, some terrible bars, the worst of which is probably "All of you can suck a penis, I do the opposite, eat all you pussies, cunnilingus." Another terrible bar is "I get dough like Ed Sheeran, call me the gingerbread man." Never Love Again, very, very uninteresting, melodramatic, like a lot of the songs on the album. The second half of the instrumental is where the song just completely collapses for me. It sounds like when you're like 11 or 12 and you want to be a music producer and you open up FL Studio Demo and you just fuck around with drum patterns and melodies. That's what the end of that song sounds like. Little Engine, it kind of fits in with the horror theme, I guess you can call it a theme, and aesthetic of the album. It vaguely gives off that vibe. Again, there's always one stupid bar on every song for this album. This one is, call this evil in tint, like me in a limo. The instrumental for the song Lock It Up is, I think, an example of a pattern that a lot of people have seen of Eminem's over the years, and that's the fact that his beat selection is far from the best. And this particular instrumental manages to drain all the expression and individuality of someone who is so instantly recognizable as Anderson .Paak is. Again, Farewell, the instrumental, probably the worst instrumental on the album. The hook, abysmal. It's just abysmal. The song No Regrets is regretfully horrible, considering when you see who's the featured artist on here, and that's Don Toliver. Don Toliver has shown through his collaboration with Travis Scott and his solo stuff as well that he is extremely unique, expressive, interesting and inventive artist, but none of that individuality and artistic expression is on display on this particular song. Again, it's very melodramatic. The instrumental is very generic, and it steps into Logic territory. What I mean by that is Logic's last album, I think it was Confessions of a Dangerous Mind. It was a horrible album, and the main preoccupation of that album was just how affected Logic is by what people may have to say about his music online. He seems to live in a world where the whole world is against him, when he has legions and legions of dedicated fans who buy his music and send his albums to the top of the charts. So I don't know where he gets this idea that the whole world is against him. Of people who are aware of Logic's existence, I would say it's a minority of people that hold that belief that he is just not very good. And Eminem is dipping into that kind of territory where he's the most commercially successful rapper of all time, but still he is so fixated about what the minority of people have to say about his music. You're an artist that is so unapologetic, and you do exactly what you want and you say what you want, but this kind of songwriting just completely contradicts that core ideology. The last song, well, before the outro, is I Will. Nothing about this song stands out in any way, unfortunately, like a lot of the album. What I will say, and what I respect about this album is, and what I respect about Eminem, which is why I keep listening, even though I know I'm going to be fucking disappointed every single time now, is that he says exactly what he wants to say, and he has no filter, and it seems for the most part that he doesn't care about the consequences, but on this album it seemed like he didn't really care about the quality of music as well. I think the quality of this album is somewhere between, it's better than Revival, but it's slightly worse than Kamikaze, and that's not saying much.